She hid to watch the sacred mating ceremony, until the Alpha King stopped everything when he found her. In a world ruled by strength, the Omega Alara was nothing. Abused by her pack and hiding a catastrophic secret, she was forced to serve those who tormented her. Her only goal was survival, but that shattered with the arrival of the Alpha King Kalen, a ruthless monarch searching for his fated mate. When Alara is dragged into the center of the sacred mating ceremony to be humiliated, the king's presence forces her secret to erupt in a display of legendary power that no one, least of all her, was prepared for. The king stops the entire ceremony, his golden eyes locked on her, and in that moment, Alara's life as a victim ended, and her journey as a queen began. The cold of the stone floor seeped through the thin fabric of Alara's tunic, a familiar ache that had settled deep in her bones years ago. It was her constant companion, more loyal than any member of the Red Moon Pack. She scrubbed at a stubborn stain, the harsh lye soap stinging the raw cracks in her knuckles. Her world was a small, miserable circle of gray stone, dirty water, and the lingering scent of old blood. She was an Omega, the lowest of the low. Worse, she was believed to be wolfless, a curse that marked her as less than nothing in their brutal society. It was a lie, of course, a desperate, life-sustaining lie. A shadow fell over her, smelling of cloying perfume and petty cruelty. Alara didn't need to look up to know who it was. Celine, the daughter of their pack's alpha, Borin. "Still scrubbing, little rat?" Celine's voice was a silken sneer. She nudged the bucket with the toe of her expensive leather boot, sloshing dirty water over the section Alara had just cleaned. "You missed a spot." Alara bit her tongue, tasting the coppery tang of blood. She kept her eyes down, her tangled brown hair falling like a curtain to hide her face. Showing defiance would only earn her a beating. Silence was her only shield. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," Selene commanded, her tone sharpening. Slowly, Alara lifted her head. Selene was everything she was not: tall, blonde, and radiating the arrogant confidence of the powerful. Her eyes, a cold chip of blue ice, scanned Alara with undisguised contempt. "My father says the Alpha King is coming," Selene said, a manic excitement dancing in her eyes. "King Kalen himself. He is searching for his mate during the great mating ceremony. And when he finds her, it will be me." The name hit Alara like a physical blow. King Kalen, the Alpha of Alphas, a being of mythic power, a warrior king who had carved an empire from the chaos of the warring packs. He was a ruthless, cold-hearted ruler, and the thought of him coming here sent a shard of pure terror through her. "All unmated females are to present themselves. Even you, wolfless filth," Selene added, her lip curling. "Imagine the king's disgust when he sees you in the lineup. It will be hilarious." She kicked the bucket over completely, sending a tidal wave of foul water across the floor. Ilara flinched back, but not before the icy liquid soaked the hem of her tunic. Selene laughed, a high, cruel sound that echoed in the cavernous hall. Then she was gone, leaving Ilara shivering in the spreading puddle. Ilara closed her eyes, fighting the hot tears that threatened to fall. Crying was a weakness she could not afford. Instead, she focused on the secret she held chained deep inside her, a hurricane locked in a glass jar. Her wolf was not just present, it was ancient, apocalyptic. A being of pure white fur and silver eyes, a creature of legend that hadn't been seen in a millennium. The lunar wolf. Her parents had died protecting that secret, binding her wolf and her scent with their last breath, leaving her with a pouch of crushed herbs she wore around her neck to complete the illusion. They had known that to be revealed was to be hunted. This power was not a gift. It was a death sentence. And now, the Alpha King was coming. An event she could not avoid. A gathering where every wolf would be scrutinized by the most powerful alpha alive. The fragile walls she had built around her secret were about to be tested by a seismic force. For the first time in her life, Ilara felt the cold touch of true despair. Survival was no longer a matter of endurance. It was a matter of time. The next few days passed in a blur of frantic preparations and heightened cruelty. The pack was electric with a mixture of fear and anticipation for the king's arrival. For Ilara, this meant more work, more abuse. She was tasked with cleaning the royal suites, a place she was normally forbidden from even approaching. Alpha Borin oversaw her work personally. He was a brute of a man, with a thick neck and small, mean eyes. He shoved her against a wall as she carried a heavy load of fresh linens. "Don't you dare bring your omega stench in here," he growled, his breath hot and sour. "You will make this place fit for a king, or I will break every bone in your body. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Alpha," she whispered, her voice trembling. He backhanded her across the face for the tremor in her voice. The blow sent her sprawling, the clean linen scattering across the dusty floor. Pain exploded in her cheek, sharp and blinding. "Useless," he spat, before stalking away. Ilara gathered the linens, her cheek throbbing. Her wolf, the great white beast she kept caged, stirred in a rare surge of fury. A low growl rumbled in her chest, a sound she quickly choked back down. Releasing it would mean death. She clutched the small leather pouch of herbs at her neck, its familiar, earthy scent a fragile anchor in her storm of fear and rage. The day of the king's arrival dawned gray and cold. The air itself seemed to hum with a strange energy, a pressure that made Alara's teeth ache. She was herded with the other Omegas to the edge of the great field, where the pack would assemble to greet the monarch. She tried to make herself as small as possible, to blend into the shadows at the very back of the crowd. Then he arrived. He did not come with a grand procession. There was only a quiet thunder, the ground vibrating as if a storm was gathering directly overhead. King Kalen walked out of the forest, flanked by a single warrior who had to be his beta. The Alpha King was a physical manifestation of power. He was impossibly tall, well over 6.5 feet, with shoulders as broad as a doorway. He was dressed in simple black leather that did nothing to hide the lethal muscle beneath. His face was all harsh lines and brutal angles, as if carved from granite, and his hair was the color of midnight. But it was his eyes that held everyone captive. They were not a normal color. They were a molten liquid gold, blazing with an ancient predatory intelligence. When his gaze swept over the assembled pack, a collective shiver of terror and awe went through them. This was not just an alpha. This was a primordial force of nature. Alpha Borin fell to one knee, his head bowed. "Alpha King Kalen," he choked out, his voice thick with fear. "The Red Moon Pack welcomes you." Kalen did not acknowledge him. His golden eyes continued their slow, methodical scan of the crowd, of every single wolf present. He was searching. Ilara knew it instinctively. He was hunting. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She pulled her thin cloak tighter, sinking lower, praying to a goddess she wasn't sure she believed in. "Don't see me. Please, don't see me." His gaze swept past her section of the crowd. For a breathtaking moment she thought she was safe. She risked a small, shallow breath of relief. It was a mistake. A sudden gust of wind, sharp and mischievous, whipped through the field. It caught the hood of her cloak, tearing it back from her head. More critically, it lifted the small pouch of herbs from her neck, momentarily scattering the carefully constructed illusion that masked her true scent. For a single, apocalyptic second, her real scent, the impossible fragrance of winter pine after a frost, of distant starlight, of ancient untamed magic, was released into the air. King Kalen stopped. His entire body went rigid. The casual predatory grace was gone, replaced by the lethal stillness of a thundercloud about to break. His head snapped in her direction, his golden eyes locking onto hers from across the field. They widened, blazing with an intensity that burned her to her very soul. The world fell away. The noise of the crowd, the biting wind, the throbbing pain in her cheek, it all vanished. There was only the connection, a violent, magnetic pull that slammed into her with the force of a physical blow. It was a feeling of homecoming and terror, of being found and being trapped all at once. His wolf, a colossal beast of shadow and rage she could feel even from this distance, roared a single, possessive word that echoed not in the air, but directly in her mind. Mine. Panic, pure and primal, seized Alara. The bond, the fated mate bond she had only heard of in hushed whispers, was real. And it had just shackled her to the most dangerous man on the continent. Her survival instinct screamed. Before anyone could react, before the king could move, she turned and fled. She bolted from the back of the crowd, disappearing into the warren of buildings behind the great hall. She ran without thought, her bare feet slapping against the cold, damp earth, driven by a terror so profound it eclipsed everything else. She had been found. Her life was over. Kalen took a step forward, a feral growl ripping from his throat. The entire pack flinched, the sheer power in that sound forcing many of the weaker wolves to their knees. His golden eyes were fixed on the spot where she had vanished, glowing with a manic light. He had searched for centuries. He had waded through oceans of blood and mountains of corpses, a hollow ache in his chest where his mate should have been. And now he had found her. A tiny, terrified creature who smelled of heaven and ran from him as if he were the devil. "Lorcan!" he snarled, his voice a low thunder. His beta, a scarred warrior with calm, gray eyes, was instantly at his side. "My king." "Find her," Kalen commanded. The order was absolute, laced with the lethal authority of the Alpha of Alphas. "Bring her to me, now." But Alpha Borin, ever the opportunist and desperate to curry favor, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, forgive the interruption. She is nothing. A wolfless Omega, a disgrace. She is not worthy of your notice." Kalen's gaze shifted to Borin. The temperature on the field dropped by 20 degrees. The molten gold of his eyes turned to frozen, lethal ice. "Did I speak to you?" Borin paled, sweat beading on his forehead. No, my king." "Then close your mouth before I tear it from your face," Kalen said, his voice deceptively soft. He turned his attention back to his beta. "Gently, Lorcan. She is afraid." Lorcan nodded once and disappeared, moving with a silent, supernatural speed. Kalen forced himself to remain, to endure the suffocating formalities, but his entire being, every cell, every fiber of his soul, was screaming to follow the scent that had imprinted itself on his very essence. He would have her. He would burn the world to the ground to possess her. Alara hid in the filth and shadows of the kitchens, her body trembling uncontrollably. She had wedged herself behind a stack of old firewood, making herself as small as possible. The bond was a living thing inside her, a humming wire connecting her to him, pulsing with his ferocious need and a possessiveness that terrified her. He was looking for her. She could feel his power sweeping through the pack grounds like a searchlight. Her mind raced. How had he found her? The herbs had never failed. It must have been the wind, a cruel twist of fate that had just signed her death warrant. Or worse. She heard footsteps approaching, heavy and deliberate. Her heart leaped into her throat. But it was not the king. It was Celine, and behind her, two of her father's largest enforcers. Celine's face was a mask of incandescent fury. Her eyes were narrowed slits of jealous rage. "There you are, you little gutter rat," she hissed. "What do you want?" Alara whispered, her voice shaking. "What do I want?" Selene laughed, a chilling, unhinged sound. "You tried to ensnare the king. A wolfless creature like you. Did you think he would actually want you? You, who are nothing but dirt beneath my feet? Alara shook her head frantically. No, I swear. It was a mistake. Oh, it was a mistake, all right. Your last one, Selene said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. My father and I have decided. The pack needs to see what happens to filth that gets above its station. It's time for the mating ceremony to begin, and you are going to be the main event. Before Alara could protest, the two enforcers seized her. They were huge, their hands like iron bands around her thin arms. They dragged her from her hiding place, her feet scrambling for purchase on the grimy floor. She struggled, but it was like a mouse fighting two bears. It was hopeless. They hauled her out of the kitchens and into the fading light of the afternoon. The entire pack was now gathered around the great ceremonial circle, a ring of ancient stones in the center of the field. King Kalen stood near a carved stone throne, his posture rigid, his golden eyes scanning the crowd with a simmering impatience that promised violence. His gaze landed on her as she was dragged into the circle. His eyes flared and a low growl rumbled through the assembled wolves. He started to move toward her, but Alpha Borin stepped into his path, bowing low. Your Majesty, Borin said, his voice booming with false sincerity. We have found the source of the disturbance. This Omega tried to use foul magic to trick you, to cast a scent illusion. We are about to administer pack justice, a lesson for all to witness. Selene shoved Alara forward, sending her stumbling to her knees in the center of the circle. The hard-packed earth was cold and unforgiving. The eyes of the entire pack were on her, a sea of contempt, disgust, and morbid curiosity. She is a wolfless disgrace, Selene shouted to the crowd. She hides in the shadows and tries to steal what is rightfully ours. She has no wolf, no honor, no place here. The pack growled in agreement, their collective animosity a physical weight pressing down on Alara. She looked up, her terrified eyes finding the king's. His face was a thunderous mask of rage, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He was being held in place by their ancient laws, by the protocol that gave a local alpha dominion over their own pack's justice, at least for a time. But his patience was wearing thin. The air around him was beginning to crackle with raw, untamed power. Prove it, Selene sneered, leaning down close to Alara's ear. Show them the pathetic, wolfless creature you are. Try to shift. Alara shook her head, tears finally tracking paths through the grime on her cheeks. I can't. Oh, we know, Alpha Borin said, stepping into the circle. He loomed over her, a monstrous silhouette against the dying sun. But we're going to help you try. He drew back his foot and kicked her hard in the ribs. Pain, white-hot and blinding, exploded in her side. A sickening crack echoed in the sudden silence. The crowd gasped. Alara cried out, curling into a ball on the ground, struggling to breathe. Shift! Borin roared, kicking her again. The agony was immense, a fire consuming her. But beneath the pain, something else was stirring. The great white wolf, chained and sedated for 18 years, was beginning to wake. The abuse, the terror, the searing agony. It was all fuel. The chains of her parents' final spell were groaning, straining under the pressure. From the edge of the circle, Kalen's voice cut through the air like a blade of ice. Enough. The word was not loud, but it carried an apocalyptic weight. It slammed into Borin, making him stagger back a step. The entire pack froze, the bloodlust in their eyes replaced by primal fear. But Borin, caught in his own sadistic fervor and desperate to prove his point, ignored the warning. He grabbed Alara by the hair, yanking her head back. She is my pack's problem to deal with, he bellowed, his face contorted in a furious snarl. She will show us what she is. He raised his fist to strike her again, to deliver a blow that would surely shatter her jaw. That was the moment the chains broke. A wave of raw power, cold and silver like moonlight, erupted from Alara. It was not a request. It was a declaration. It threw Alpha Boran backward as if he were a child's toy, sending him crashing into the dirt 10 feet away. A blinding, pure white light enveloped Alara, so brilliant it forced everyone to shield their eyes. It was not the light of the sun. It was older, more elemental. The very air vibrated, humming a song of creation and destruction. The sound of her bones breaking and reforming was sickeningly loud, but it was too fast for a normal shift. It was an instantaneous, violent becoming. The light pulsed once, twice, and then receded, revealing what stood in the center of the circle. It was not a normal wolf. She was colossal, larger than any 3 wolves combined, her form radiating an ethereal glow. Her fur was the color of freshly fallen snow, so pure it seemed to absorb the fading daylight and shine with its own internal luminescence. Her eyes were not wolf eyes. They were pools of liquid silver, ancient and filled with the wisdom of the moon itself. A low growl rumbled in her chest, a sound that was not of the earth, but of the cosmos, the sound of stars being born. She was the lunar wolf, the white wolf of prophecy, the legendary mate to the Alpha King. Absolute, terrified silence descended upon the field. The pack stared, their minds unable to process what they were seeing. Disgust and contempt had vanished, replaced by a soul-deep, religious terror. They were looking at a god. Alpha Boran and Selene stared, their faces masks of chalk-white horror and dawning catastrophic realization. They had not been tormenting an Omega. They had been abusing a queen, a goddess. Ilara, in her new form, felt the power coursing through her. It was a dizzying, overwhelming flood. The pain was gone, replaced by a strength so vast she felt she could unmake the world. She looked at her tormentors, and for the first time, she did not feel fear. She felt a cold, righteous fury. But before she could act, a blur of black shadow moved with impossible speed. King Kalen was suddenly there, in the center of the circle with her. He had shifted. His wolf was a creature of pure nightmare, a beast of midnight fur and burning gold eyes, nearly her equal in size. He was the darkness to her light, the storm to her calm. He did not challenge her. He did not confront her. He placed his massive form between her and the stunned pack, a living shield of shadow and rage. He faced the crowd, his teeth bared in a lethal snarl that promised death to anyone who dared to even breathe in her direction. Then he did something that shattered the last remnants of the old world order. The Alpha King, the most powerful being alive, turned to her. He lowered his great head, and in front of the entire world he knelt. He bowed to his mate, his queen, his Luna. The message was absolute. It was undeniable. The reign of the Red Moon's cruelty was over. A new era had begun. The image of the colossal black wolf kneeling before the incandescent white one was seared into the minds of every wolf present. It was a moment of pure, paradigm-shifting power. Kalen's submission was not one of weakness, but of ultimate recognition. It was a vow, a coronation. He rose slowly, his golden eyes never leaving her silver ones. He let out a soft whine, a sound so full of longing and reverence it seemed impossible, coming from such a terrifying creature. He nudged her gently with his massive head, a silent question. "Are you all right?" Ilara felt the question resonate through the bond. The fury that had coursed through her began to recede, replaced by a profound sense of shock and a strange, overwhelming feeling of safety. For the first time in her life, she was not alone. She was not prey. She was protected. She nudged him back, a gesture of acceptance. The bond between them flared, no longer a source of terror but a current of shared strength. Together, they turned to face the pack. The sight of the two legendary wolves, light and dark, standing side by side sent a fresh wave of fear through the crowd. Kalen shifted back into his human form in a seamless, fluid motion. He stood naked and magnificent in the moonlight, his body a canvas of scars and lethal power. He looked at Alpha Borin, who was still scrambling backward in the dirt, his face a mess of terror and disbelief. You! Kalen's voice was unnervingly calm, which was far more terrifying than his rage. You dared to lay your hands on my mate. It was not a question. It was a death sentence. Lorcan, his beta, appeared at his side, holding out a pair of leather trousers and a cloak, which Kalen donned without taking his eyes off Borin. Guards, Kalen said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the field. Seize him. Seize his daughter. Take them to the cells. They will await their judgment. The Red Moon warriors hesitated for a fraction of a second, their loyalty torn. But one look at the burning fury in their king's eyes, and the sight of the glowing lunar wolf still standing at his side, shattered their allegiance to their old alpha. They moved as one, grabbing the sputtering Borin and the shrieking Selene. You can't do this, Selene screamed, her face wild. She's a freak, a monster. Father, do something. But Borin was silent, his eyes wide with the horror of his monumental miscalculation. They were dragged away, their protests swallowed by the night. Kalen turned his attention back to Ilara. She felt his gaze, and with it, a sudden wave of self-consciousness. The immense power was still thrumming through her, but beneath it, the frightened Omega remained. She did not know how to shift back. She did not know how to control this new, terrifying body. Sensing her distress, Kalen approached her slowly, his hands held out in a placating gesture. It's all right, he murmured, his voice now a low, soothing rumble that vibrated through the bond. Don't be afraid. I am with you. Just focus on me. Think of your human form. She looked into his golden eyes, and in their depths, she saw not just possessiveness, but a profound adoration that stole her breath. She focused on that feeling, on the anchor of his presence. The world dissolved into a swirl of white light again, and when it cleared, she was herself, kneeling in the dirt, wrapped in his heavy black cloak which he had draped over her shoulders. She was trembling, exhausted, and overwhelmed. Kalen knelt in front of her, his movements gentle, as if he were handling the most precious, fragile thing in the universe. He gently cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheek where Borin's blow had landed. A faint green light emanated from his hand, and the pain, the swelling, the bruise, it all vanished as if it had never been. A king's healing touch. What is your name? He asked, his voice softer than she could have imagined. Ilara, she whispered. Ilara, he repeated, the name a vow on his lips. My Ilara, my queen. He leaned in, pressing his forehead against hers. I have waited for you for 500 years. I will never let anyone harm you again. I swear it on my life. He lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. The pack watched in stunned silence as their king carried the former Omega, now revealed as their true Luna, away from the ceremonial circle and toward the grand lodge he had claimed as his own. The royal suite was a world away from the cold stone floors she had always known. A fire roared in a massive hearth, casting a warm, golden glow over plush rugs and rich tapestries. Kalen set her down gently on a soft, fur-covered settee before the fire. He had already sent for food, water, and clean clothes, which were laid out for her. Ilara clutched the heavy cloak around her, feeling small and out of place. The man, the king, before her was a living legend, and she didn't even know what she was anymore. He seemed to sense her turmoil. He kept a respectful distance, his immense presence filling the room but not crowding her. I know you have questions, he said, his golden eyes soft. Ask them. The white wolf, she began, her voice barely a whisper. What am I? You are the fulfillment of a prophecy, Kalen explained, his voice resonating with ancient lore. The first lunar wolf was the mate of the first Alpha King. She was a being of immense power, a balancer, the light to his dark. She was the heart of our people. The prophecy foretold that when our kind strayed too far into darkness, when cruelty and greed ruled the packs, she would be reborn to unite us. He gestured around them. The world has become a dark place, Alara. Alphas like Borin are not uncommon. They rule through fear, not strength. They prey on the weak. The great mating ceremony was my last desperate attempt to find you, to restore the balance before our world consumed itself. It was too much to take in. A prophecy. A legendary wolf. Her? The girl who scrubbed floors and lived on scraps? My parents. Did they know? Kalen's expression softened with sympathy. They must have. The power of a lunar wolf is detectable at birth to those of its bloodline. They hid you. They bound your wolf in your scent, a feat of incredible magic, to protect you. If your power had been discovered, every ambitious alpha, every usurper would have hunted you. They would have tried to either kill you or chain you, to possess your power for themselves. Understanding dawned, and with it, a fresh wave of grief for the parents she barely remembered. Their sacrifice had been for her. They had given her a life of hardship to save her from a fate far worse. You need to rest, Kalen said, his voice firm but gentle. Tomorrow we will hold the tribunal. Justice will be served. And then we will begin our life together. The word together sent a strange flutter through her. She looked at him, truly looked at him, the feared Alpha King, the ruthless warrior. And she saw the loneliness in his eyes, the centuries of waiting. He was her mate, the other half of her soul. The fear was still there, but it was now mingled with a burgeoning sense of connection, a pull toward this powerful, dangerous man who looked at her as if she were the sunrise. The next day, the great hall was packed. Every member of the Red Moon Pack was present, their faces a mixture of fear, awe, and uncertainty. 2 thrones had been placed on the raised dais where the Alpha's seat usually stood alone. Kalen led Alara to one, his hand a warm, steady presence on her lower back. She was dressed in a simple but elegant gown of deep blue that had been provided for her hair cleaned and brushed. She felt like an imposter in a queen's skin. Kalen took his seat beside her. His presence was an unshakable mountain. He was in command. Bring them in, he ordered. Alpha Borin and Selene were dragged forward and thrown to the floor before the thrones. They were stripped of their finery, dressed in rags not unlike the ones Alara had worn her entire life. Their faces were pale, their arrogance shattered, replaced by a desperate animal fear. Borin of the Red Moon! Kalen's voice boomed, devoid of any warmth. You stand accused of the abuse and torture of your Luna Queen. You stand accused of dereliction of your duties as Alpha, of fostering a culture of cruelty and weakness. How do you plead? Borin trembled, unable to meet the king's gaze. I did not know, he stammered. Mercy, my king. I did not know who she was. Ignorance is not a defense, Kalen snarled. You abused an Omega. You tortured a member of your pack for sport. It does not matter who she was. It matters what you are. A tyrant. A bully. A disgrace to the title of Alpha. He then turned his chilling gaze to Selene. And you are accused of the same. What say you? Selene, unlike her father, still had a spark of venom left. She glared up at Alara, her eyes burning with pure hatred. She is nothing, a trick. She bewitched you. I am the rightful mate for an Alpha, not this wolfless rat in a wolf's skin. A collective gasp went through the hall. To insult the king's mate, the lunar wolf, was blasphemy. Kalen did not even look at her. His eyes were on Alara. The judgment is not mine to give, he said, his voice softening as he spoke to her. They are your tormentors. The laws of the first moon state that justice in this matter belongs to you, my queen. Every eye in the hall turned to Alara. She felt a tremor of her old fear. She was just an Omega. How could she pass judgment? But then she felt the power of the lunar wolf stirring within her, a well of cold, clear certainty. She remembered every lash, every insult, every moment of cold and hunger. She remembered the crack of her own ribs. She stood up, her small frame radiating an authority that silenced the entire hall. She looked down at Borin and Celine, not with hatred, but with a profound and final finality. You believe power is the right to inflict pain on the powerless, she said, her voice clear and strong, ringing with an otherworldly resonance. You are wrong. True power is the strength to protect them. She met Kalen's gaze and he gave her a subtle, encouraging nod. Death would be a mercy you do not deserve, Alara continued, her voice turning to ice. You worship strength and despise the wolfless. Therefore, you will be given what you deserve. You will be stripped of your wolves. You will become what you have always hated. You will be exiled from these lands and forced to live as mortals do, with no pack, no power, and no honor. That is my judgment. The sentence was met with a stunned silence. It was a fate worse than death. To have one's wolf torn away was to have one's soul ripped out. Celine let out a raw, agonized scream of denial. Borin simply collapsed, sobbing. The queen has spoken, Kalen declared, his voice leaving no room for argument. It is done. As the guards dragged the condemned pair away, a new feeling settled in Alara's heart. It was not triumph. It was not vengeance. It was justice. And with it, the first true taste of peace she had ever known. The chains of her past were finally, truly broken. In the weeks that followed, Alara's life transformed. Kalen was a patient teacher, helping her understand the immense power that now flowed through her veins. He taught her how to communicate with her wolf, how to call upon its lunar energy for healing and defense. They spent hours together, walking the forests, their bond deepening with every shared glance, every touch. The cold, ruthless king was gone, replaced by a devoted, passionate mate who cherished her above all else. The Red Moon Pack, under the temporary leadership of Lorcan, was being reformed. The old hierarchies of cruelty were dismantled. A new sense of hope began to permeate the pack. They looked at Alara not with fear, but with a growing reverence. She was their Luna, their queen of light. But not everyone was pleased with this new world order. Deep within the king's own court, a cancer of jealousy and ambition festered. Kalen's cousin, Lord Valerius, had long coveted the throne. He had believed Kalen's inability to find a mate was a weakness he could one day exploit. Alara's arrival, the fulfillment of the prophecy, had ruined all his plans. The power she brought to Kalen made him unassailable, unless she was removed. One night, as Alara was in her chambers reading an ancient tome about the lunar wolves, the air suddenly grew cold. The fire in the hearth sputtered and died. She looked up, a sense of unease prickling her skin. Lord Valerius stepped out of the shadows. He was a handsome man, with a courtier's smile that did not reach his cold, calculating eyes. In his hand, he held a dagger forged from obsidian, a rare material known to be poisonous to werewolves, capable of dampening their healing abilities. My queen, he said with a mock bow, forgive the intrusion. I simply had to see the legend for myself. Alara stood slowly, her heart beginning to pound. Kalen was in a meeting with the pack elders. She was alone. What do you want, Valerius? A shame it has to end so soon, he said, ignoring her question as he advanced on her. You've brought him such happiness. It's sickening. The throne should be mine. He is weak, softened by you. Without you, he will crumble, and I will be there to pick up the pieces. He lunged, the obsidian dagger flashing in the dim light. The old Alara would have frozen, would have accepted her fate. But she was not the old Alara. Her instincts, honed by her new power, screamed. She did not try to shift. There was no time. Instead, she threw her hands up, and in response to her desperate will, a wave of pure silver energy erupted from her palms. It was not a physical force, but a wave of cold, ethereal light. The energy washed over Valerius. He screamed, dropping the dagger as if it had become white hot. The lunar power did not harm his body, it attacked his wolf directly. He collapsed to the ground, writhing, his connection to his inner beast severed and thrown into chaos. The door to the chamber exploded inward, blasted off its hinges by a wave of pure physical force. Kalen stood there, his eyes glowing with an apocalyptic, murderous rage. He took in the scene in an instant. Ilara standing over his cousin, the obsidian dagger on the floor, the lingering scent of Valerius's malevolent intent. The temperature in the room plummeted. A feral, inhuman snarl ripped from Kalen's chest. "You dared," he whispered, the sound more terrifying than any shout. "You dared to threaten her." Valerius, still twitching on the floor, looked up into the face of his king and saw not a ruler, but a god of death. He saw his own end. Kalen moved, a blur of shadow and fury. He did not kill his cousin quickly. The justice he delivered was swift, brutal, and absolute. It was a clear and bloody message to anyone who would ever consider harming his queen. When it was over, Kalen went to Alara, his rage vanishing as he checked her for any injury, his hands gentle. He held her close, burying his face in her hair. "I am sorry," he choked out, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have been here. I failed to protect you." Alara pulled back, placing a hand on his cheek. "You didn't fail," she said, her voice steady, "and I am not powerless. I protected myself." He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not a fragile Omega he needed to shield, but a powerful queen standing at his side, a partner, an equal. A proud, fierce love bloomed in his chest, chasing away the last of his ancient loneliness. He was not just her protector. She was his salvation. 6 months passed. The world settled into a new rhythm, a new age of hope. Alara stood on the grand balcony of the royal citadel, overlooking the capital city. She was no longer the frightened girl from the Red Moon Pack. She was Luna Queen Alara, beloved by her people, a confident and wise ruler. She had embraced her power, using it to heal the broken lands and unite the fractured packs under a banner of peace and strength. The evening air was cool and crisp. She felt strong arms wrap around her from behind, a familiar chin resting on her shoulder. The scent of ozone and raw power, a scent that had once terrified her, now felt like home. "What is my beautiful queen thinking about?" Kalen's voice rumbled against her ear. She smiled, leaning back into his embrace. "I was thinking about a girl who used to scrub floors," she said softly, "and how terrified she was." "That girl had the heart of a queen, even then," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "She survived the darkness. She was just waiting for the light." He turned her in his arms, his golden eyes filled with a love so profound it was a physical presence. The cold, haunted king was gone forever, healed by the love of his fated mate. In his place was a man who would move mountains for her, who looked at her as if she were the only star in his sky. "I love you, Alara," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he had thought he would never feel. "You are my anchor, my hope, my everything." "And I love you, Kalen," she replied, her heart full. "My king." He lowered his head and kissed her, a tender, passionate kiss that sealed their bond, their future, and the fate of their new world. Below them, the city lights twinkled like a mirror of the starry sky above. A diamond, once buried in the mud, still shines with an unbreakable light. And love, they had both learned, was the only magic powerful enough to remake the world. And so, the story of the lost Omega and the waiting king came to its triumphant conclusion. It's a powerful reminder that our beginnings do not define our destiny, and that true strength is not found in dominance, but in the courage to protect and the capacity to love. The journey from victim to victor is paved with resilience, and Alara's tale proves that even from the deepest darkness, a queen can rise. Thank you for joining us for this incredible story. If you were captivated by Alara's rise to power and Kaylin's devotion, make sure to destroy that like button and subscribe to the channel for more epic werewolf romances. It really helps the channel grow and ensures you never miss a new adventure. Don't forget to ring that notification bell. Let me know in the comments below. What was your favorite moment in Alara's journey? Was it her spectacular transformation, or the moment she delivered justice to her tormentors? We can't wait to hear from you.